Every branch of the military has its own elite unit, and every elite unit thinks they're the best. From hostage rescue teams that operate with zero public oversight, to psychological warfare specialists whose entire job is winning wars without firing a single bullet, to units so classified the government barely admits they exist. Today, I'm breaking down every type of special ops and what actually makes them different, starting with the one everyone thinks they already know: Navy SEALs. Here's a fun stat for you. During BUD/S training, there's a phase called Hell Week, 132 continuous hours of physical punishment with about 4 total hours of sleep, not per night. That's the entire week combined. 75 to 80% of candidates quit or get pulled, and that's before actual combat training even begins. But here's the thing, most people get wrong about SEALs. Hollywood has turned them into this universal superhero unit that does everything, everywhere, all the time. That's not what they are. SEALs are maritime and amphibious specialists, sea, air, and land. The name literally tells you. They were established by JFK in 1962, currently organized into 8 teams split across both coasts, and they operate in 4-man fire teams that combine into 8-man squads. Their deployment cycle is also way less glamorous than movies suggest. 18 months of training for every 6 months of actual deployment. That's a 3-to-1 ratio of preparation to action. And SEALs aren't even unique on the global stage. The British SBS, Israeli Naval Commandos, Russian Spetsnaz, they all fill nearly identical roles. Every serious military has some version of this unit. SEALs are an incredible tool, but they're a specific tool, not the whole toolbox. And speaking of tools people confuse for something they're not, let's talk about the Green Berets. Green Berets. Most people hear Green Berets and immediately think door-kicking commandos. They're not. They're diplomats who happen to carry rifles and speak your language. Founded in 1952, the Green Berets are organized into 5 active duty groups, each assigned a specific region of the world. About 8,000 to 9,000 active duty personnel total. Every single operator is required to speak at least one foreign language, and their cultural expertise isn't a nice bonus. It's the entire point of the unit. The training pipeline runs 24 months through the Special Forces qualification course, and roughly 70 to 75% of everyone who attempts it washes out. Here's what makes them genuinely unique. Green Berets deploy in 12-man teams called ODAs, Operational Detachment Alphas. These teams get dropped into politically sensitive, sometimes denied areas, and operate independently for months. No oversight, no backup down the street. They build relationships with local forces, train them, advise them, and when things go sideways, they fight alongside them. Now, the biggest misconception. People constantly lump Green Berets in with Army Rangers. They are not the same thing. Rangers kick doors. Green Berets train the locals to kick their own doors. Completely different mission set. And for context, this advisor and unconventional warfare role isn't uniquely American. The British AS, French First, RPIMA, and German KASK all operate in similar capacities globally. But nobody does it at the scale or regional depth of the Green Berets. Speaking of kicking doors though, let's talk about the unit that does nothing but that. Delta Force. Remember that 75 to 80% failure rate from BUD/S? Delta's selection course makes that look generous. The Combat Applications course fails roughly 90% of everyone who attempts it. 9 out of 10 candidates, most of whom are already special operators, don't make it through. Delta Force was founded in 1977 by Colonel Charlie Beckwith, who explicitly modeled the entire unit on the British SAS after serving an exchange tour with them. The result is an estimated 250 to 300 operators who do one thing: show up, solve the problem, and leave. Direct action raids, hostage rescue, counter-terrorism. That's it. They don't collect intelligence. They don't advise foreign militaries. They are the scalpel, not the handshake. But here's the detail most people don't know. Delta operates under pre-approved rules of engagement. That means they can conduct offensive operations without waiting for real-time civilian sign-off. Almost no other unit in the US military has that level of autonomy. Think about what that implies. supplies. The government looked at this unit and said, "We trust you enough to pull the trigger without asking us first." Their operational rotation runs 4 months on mission, 8 months training, and most of what they've done in the last 2 decades still classified. The movie version of Delta, the one-man army kicking down every door on the planet, doesn't exist. The real version is quieter, smaller, and significantly more terrifying. But Delta isn't the only Tier 1 unit under JSOC. Their naval counterpart has a body of work that includes the most famous raid in modern military history, SEAL Team 6/DevGRU. If Delta Force is the Tier 1 answer for land operations, DevGRU is its maritime counterpart. Same JSOC umbrella, same level of autonomy, different domain. And the selection process is arguably even more brutal, because it assumes you're already elite before you walk through the door. To even be considered for DevGRU, you need years of experience as a Navy SEAL. We're talking 5 to 10 years in the SEAL community with multiple deployments before selection. Then, you go through an additional 6-month evaluation course with a roughly 50% attrition rate. These operators represent roughly the top 2% of an already elite force. Let that sink in. 2% of the guys who already survived Bud/S Hell Week. Now, the operation everyone knows. May 2nd, 2011, Operation Neptune Spear, the raid that killed Osama bin Laden. And yes, that mission is a perfect example of what DevGRU does at its highest level. But here's the thing. That one raid has completely distorted public perception of this unit. People think DevGRU is kicking down doors every week. They're not. The ratio of training to actual missions is enormous. They run a small number of operations annually, and the rest is preparation, rehearsal, and maintaining readiness for the moment they're needed. Think of them as Delta's maritime mirror, not a better version of regular SEALs. Different tool, same tier. And worth noting, units like the British ESAS Counterterrorism Squadron, French GINN, and Israeli Shayatet 13 occupy similar Tier 1 roles internationally. But DEVGRU and Delta aren't the only ground forces in special operations. There's an entire regiment built for a completely different purpose. Rangers. Up to this point, every unit we've talked about has been small. Small teams, quiet operations, surgical precision. Rangers are the opposite. They kick the door down with 50 guys behind them. The 75th Ranger Regiment traces its lineage back to 1942, but the modern regiment was officially established in 1986. Today, it fields 3 active duty battalions plus a Special Operations Command battalion, totaling roughly 2,000 to 2,500 personnel. That's not a Special Operations unit. That's a small army, and here's the detail that defines everything about them. Rangers are trained to plan and execute a full complex raid from scratch in under 18 hours. That's the product. Speed and overwhelming aggression. While a SEAL team sends 6 guys in quiet, Rangers send a 40 to 70 person platoon plus formation through the front door before the enemy even knows the plan exists. Now, people confuse Rangers with Green Berets constantly. It's genuinely one of the most common mistakes in military conversation, but by now you know the difference. Green Berets advise, Rangers raid. One builds partner forces over months, the other hits a target tonight. Completely different jobs. Ranger School itself has about a 40 to 45% completion rate, which is brutal, but getting into the regiment has its own separate qualification standards on top of that. Worth noting, the British Parachute Regiment, France's 2nd REP, and Australia's 2nd Commando Regiment all fill similar large formation, direct action roles internationally, but Rangers, as loud as they are, still need someone to get them there. And the unit responsible for that might be the most underappreciated in all of Special Operations. Night Stalkers. Let's step away from the ground for a second, because Special Ops isn't just guys with guns. Roughly 70% of JSOC operations require one specific unit to even get off the ground. Literally, and almost nobody knows their name. The 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment has been flying the most dangerous helicopter missions on Earth since 1981. About 2,000 personnel operating exclusively modified aircraft, MH, 60 Blackhawks, MH-47 Chinooks, and AH-6 Little Birds. But here's the thing, these aren't pilots learning to fly. Every candidate needs at least 1,500 flight hours before they even begin advanced selection. They're already accomplished aviators, then 30 to 40% of them still wash out. What they're learning is how to fly in conditions no sane person would attempt. We're talking precision low-altitude operations at night, 60+ knots, zero external lighting through mountainous terrain, using nothing but night vision goggles. One miscalculation, and you're a fireball on the side of a mountain. It is one of the most technically demanding aviation roles in military history, and if the name doesn't ring a bell, the missions will. Black Hawk Down, those were Night Stalker birds. The 1993 Mogadishu raid doesn't happen without 160th Aviation assets. Neither do most of the operations we've already covered in this video. For international equivalents, British 7th Squadron, the French 4th Special Forces Helicopter Regiment, and Australia's 171st Special Operations Aviation Squadron fill comparable roles. But if the Night Stalkers get operators to the fight, the next unit is the one pulling them out of it, often under enemy fire with a medical kit in one hand and a rifle in the other. Pararescue Men, PJs. Every other unit on this list goes in to destroy something. PJs go in to bring people back. Their official motto is that others may live, and that's not some inspirational poster slogan. It's a literal job description. Pararescue men are trained to conduct rescue operations under active enemy fire. Not after the shooting stops, not once the area is secured. During. Here's what most people get wrong about PJs. They think medic with a parachute. Cool mental image. Completely inaccurate. PJs are full combat operators who also happen to hold advanced trauma medical certifications. Before they graduate, they're required to earn military freefall certification, combat diver qualification, and paramedic level medical training. They can jump out of a plane, swim to you underwater, and perform emergency surgery on you while bullets are still flying. That's not a medic. That's something else entirely. And the pipeline to become one is brutal. We're talking 24 months of training with an 80% or higher washout rate. That's comparable to Build S, except nobody makes movies about it. Only around 300 to 350 active PJs exist at any given time, operating in tiny 2 to 4 person teams, inserted by helicopter or parachute. Despite those small numbers, they rescue approximately 3,000 to 4,000 personnel every single year across combat zones and humanitarian disasters. Quick note, the British 84 Squadron, RAF, and Australian ASAR units fill similar combat search and rescue roles for their respective militaries, but PJs hold a unique place on this list. They're the only unit here whose entire identity is built around saving lives instead of taking them, and their training is just as punishing as anyone else's. But if you think running toward gunfire to save someone is intense, wait until you meet the guys whose entire job is controlling that gunfire from the ground. Combat controllers. So remember how I said PJs have one of the hardest training pipelines in the military? Combat controllers go through that same pipeline. The same freefall certification, the same combat diving qualification, the same brutal 24-month gauntlet with a 70% plus attrition rate. But then they add air traffic control and advanced terminal attack control certification on top of it, because apparently suffering wasn't enough. Here's what combat controllers actually do. They jump into locations where zero infrastructure exists, establish entire airstrips from nothing, and then manage every single aircraft operating in that airspace. We're talking about 2 to 4 person teams, sometimes a single operator, dropped into hostile territory to build and run an entire air operation. But here's the part that genuinely broke my brain. Combat controllers are the only military personnel trained to call in airstrikes while simultaneously jumping out of the aircraft that's supporting the mission. They plan the air operation, insert into the objective, hit the ground, and then direct the same planes they just jumped out of. That is absurd, and nobody knows they exist. There are roughly 200 to 250 active combat controllers in the entire military, and even people inside the special operations community sometimes mix them up with forward air controllers, which is a completely different role with different certifications. Quick note, the British RAF has Joint Terminal Attack Controllers, France has Commandos de l'Air, and Australia runs tactical air control parties that fill comparable roles. But the fact that I have to explain what a combat controller even is tells you everything about how criminally underrated they are. And speaking of underrated, the next entry doesn't even use weapons. PSYOP. This is the unit that can win a battle without firing a single round. No breaching charges, no helicopter insertions, no sniper nests, just words. The Army's psychological operations capability has roots going back to World War II, but it didn't become a formal regiment until 1998 and wasn't recognized as a full Army branch until 2006. Today, it operates with roughly 2,000 personnel across active and reserve components, deploying in small teams of 4 to 12 people. Their job is influence, strategic campaigns at the national level, tactical campaigns on the battlefield, and everything in between. And sometimes their entire mission is 0% kinetic, no shots fired, no explosions, just messaging designed to change behavior at scale. So what does that actually look like? Leaflet drops, radio broadcasts, digital messaging campaigns. Since the 1990s alone, millions of leaflets have been distributed across conflict zones, telling enemy combatants how to surrender safely, warning civilians to evacuate, undermining morale before a single boot crosses the line. Here's the thing, the goal isn't deception, it's not mind control. That's the biggest misconception, and spy movies have made it 10 times worse. CSIOP is closer to wartime advertising with a very specific behavioral objective: encourage surrender, reduce civilian casualties, build local support, erode the enemy's will to fight. It's not glamorous, but a well-executed influence campaign can save more lives than a platoon of operators ever could. And naturally, the most sensitive operations remain classified. Cold War campaigns and early war on terror efforts are the most publicly documented, but there's a lot we'll never see. Worth noting, Russia's GRU, Taiwan's General Political Warfare Bureau, and Britain's 15 Psychological Operations Group all run structurally similar programs. This isn't uniquely American, it's just how modern warfare works. But if SPYOP changes minds from a distance, the next unit changes entire countries from the inside. Civil affairs. Everything on this list so far has been about fighting, enabling fighting, shaping the conditions for fighting. Civil affairs is about what happens when all of that stops. Formally established as a U.S. Army Reserve branch in 1955, CA deploys teams of 4 to 6 personnel into a single location for 6 to 12 months at a time. Their mission isn't to destroy anything, it's to build, establish governance, coordinate humanitarian aid, manage civilian populations, advise host nation governments on how to rebuild civil infrastructure from scratch. After the last bullet is fired, civil affairs is still there. Here's what makes them genuinely unique. Civil affairs operators are the only U.S. military personnel specifically trained in civil law, civilian administrative systems, and nation building. They're effectively embedded diplomats who happen to wear a uniform. About 1,200 active personnel across active, reserve, and National Guard components doing work that looks nothing like what you'd expect from the military. And they've been everywhere: Panama, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan. Nearly every major reconstruction effort since the 1990s has had CA teams on the ground, but you've never heard about them. And that's by design. Governance work doesn't benefit from military branding. The operations are sensitive, slow, and completely unglamorous compared to everything else on this list. The misconception civil affairs destroys is a big one. The idea that the military only does combat. CA exists entirely in the space after conflict, specifically to prevent the next one. No raids, no extractions. Just the quiet, grinding work of making sure a country doesn't collapse the moment everyone else leaves. For international equivalents, British CI/MIC, German Civil Military Cooperation, and Australian CIMIC units perform comparable post-conflict stabilization roles. But if civil affairs is the quietest branch on this list, the next one might be the loudest return to pure combat you didn't see coming. Recon Marines. So by now, you understand Rangers. You understand Green Berets. One does large-scale raids with speed and overwhelming force. The other embeds with foreign militaries for months, advising and conducting unconventional warfare. Two very different tools. But what happens when you need both at the same time? That's the question Marine leadership asked in the mid-2000s, and their answer was to build their own Special Operations Command from scratch. MARSOC was formally established in 2000 2006, making it the newest Special Operations Command in the entire U.S. military. But the lineage goes way further back. The original Marine Raider battalions fought in World War II before being disbanded in 1944. 62 years later, the Marines brought the name back because they identified a gap that nobody else was filling. They needed operators who could conduct direct action raids like Rangers, but also handle unconventional warfare and regional advising like Green Berets, all in expeditionary and maritime environments. Today, there are approximately 2,500 personnel across 3 Raider battalions, organized into 4-man fire teams and 13-man squads. Their individual training course runs roughly 9 months with a 40 to 50% attrition rate. Not the highest on this list, but absolutely nothing to dismiss. Here's the thing nobody talks about. MARSOC gets confused with Navy SEALs constantly because of the amphibious connection, but the roles are completely different. SEALs are maritime focused. MARSOC is expeditionary raiding and unconventional warfare. Think sustained combat operations requiring both regional expertise and direct action capacity. That's the niche. And for context, the British Royal Marine Special Forces, Dutch Royal Marine Corps Recon, and Italian San Marco Marine Regiment all fill comparable roles internationally. The youngest unit on this list built to fill a gap everyone else ignored. And honestly, it's about time they got the recognition. But if you think being overlooked is bad, wait until you hear about the unit so secretive that even confirming it exists is a problem. Intelligence Support Activity. Every unit on this list has a reputation. Movies, books, documentaries, video games, Wikipedia pages filled with operational detail. You can Google any of them and walk away feeling like you learned something. The Intelligence Support Activity doesn't work like that. Established in 1981, ISA operates as JSOC's dedicated intelligence arm. Their job is straightforward on paper. Find the targets that Delta Force and DEVGRU then go hit. They deploy globally in teams of 2 to 6 people, collecting human intelligence in denied areas and providing direct action support for the most sensitive operations the United States military conducts. That's about where the public knowledge ends. Here's the thing. ISA is so classified that the United States government didn't even publicly acknowledge the unit existed until the 1990s. Over a decade of global operations with zero official confirmation that the people doing them were real. And even after acknowledgement, specific operations are still almost entirely unknown. Discussing certain details can still technically violate security protocols today. The personnel estimate sits somewhere between 200 and 400 total operators and support staff, and that number only exists because it showed up in declassified congressional records. The actual figure is classified, but here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. The unit has changed its name multiple times specifically to avoid public identification. Known cover names include the Army of Northern Virginia and the Tactical Concepts Activity. Those are just the ones we know about. Every time the name leaks, they pick a new one. Think about that. This isn't a unit that classifies its missions, it classifies its own identity. And the research on ISA is thin by design. Primary sources are limited to declassified Cold War operations and rare congressional testimony. Modern operations are completely unknown to the public. There are no memoirs, no tell-all books, no former operators doing podcast tours. For context, comparable units exist internationally. Israeli Mossad Special Operations Elements, Russian FSB Spetsnaz, and British Intelligence Community Special Operations Groups all occupy similar intelligence collection and direct action hybrid roles. Most details about them are similarly classified, but ISA stands alone in one specific way. Every other unit on this list has a Wikipedia page with real operational detail. ISA's Wikipedia page is mostly about what we don't know, and that tells you everything you need to know about who they are. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.